Hello and welcome to today's video where we're going to be talking about, is it really spirituality or is it just capitalism? Because the truth is that we are living in a world where we are so conditioned to see everything through the lens of capitalism, of what we can produce and what we can consume. That decoupling these two things, that seeing them, that decoupling our humanity from the consumption and production machine that essentially runs everything on our planet, and seeing any part of ourselves as separate from this is something we are losing more and more and more. Every decade, every century, every generation, we are continually being sold that more and more and more of our life needs to be a part of the economy, to the point where, like I say, I feel like we are losing our capacity to see any part of ourselves as outside of this system. And this is really, I think, an important topic to look at, because spirituality is one of those things that I feel that when we have a true connection within ourselves, and when we can find something that resonates with us and that holds true for us and that is going to eventually end up being deeply personal for us, it can be incredibly fulfilling on a level that I feel like we can rarely even explain or understand without having had the experience, okay? And it really actually breaks my heart on a daily basis to talk to my clients and to talk to the people who are, in my mystery school, and just people on Instagram, people on YouTube who genuinely don't feel a connection to something outside of themselves, or who don't feel in any way that they have like an actual spirituality, and they're searching for it and they're looking for it and they want it, but they don't know how to establish it and they don't know how to find it and they don't know where it is. And they're looking out into the world and they're looking on social media and they're looking to teachers and guides, and they're finding more and more that they are not getting that connection. And they are feeling deeply lost and deeply alone and deeply afraid. And there's just like this sense that they're never good enough and that they're never safe and that they're never okay, and they don't feel secure and they don't feel like they can make decisions. And like there's just so much that goes into this that then drives them deeper into the system and into our systems of consumption and production. And it's just like this snake eating its own tail situation, where the longer we try to find our connection and our spirituality and our safety and our this sense of feeling like we can know something, or that we can be connected to something higher than ourselves within this system, the farther away we get from it, and the more we get convinced that it's just because we're not investing in the system enough. It's just because we're not doing enough in the system. And at the same time, we have so many of these kind of like influencers and people out there who continually perpetuate this idea that when you are truly living your spiritual path, that when you are really living the life you should be living, when you are living your purpose, when you're doing all of these things that we think spirituality is, you're going to be abundant. You're going to have more resources than you've ever wanted. You're going to have more money. You're going to have more time freedom. You're going to find your group of people that like totally understand you and love you, and your tribe, they say, that you're going to like manifest this life that's just beyond your wildest expectations. and that is what spirituality is. That is what being in alignment is. That it should be being reflected in your outer world as abundance and as what success is to the system. And this is obfuscating the whole path and what real spirituality actually is, and what true spirituality is going to give us when we actually establish it. Okay? So I want you to know, again, just like a little bit about me and where I'm coming from with this, is that I grew up deeply entrenched in the Christian church. And spirituality for me has always been like my main area of interest, right? Like finding out eventually one day, finding out that I'm autistic, and that this is like a common thing for people with autism to have like an area of life, a thing that they become obsessed with. And for me, for my whole life, it's been spirituality. Like I basically came out of the womb, I learned to speak. My first words were water and where's God? Like, where is heaven? Can I bring my things to heaven? And my mom was like, I can't believe I'm like having this like weird theological like discussion with my 3-year-old. And I spent a lot of my time in my youth in my room praying and believing that I was supposed to be able to like hear the voice of God, and that the voice of God was supposed to be able to help me and right, like it wasn't because I like wanted to be better than anybody else. It wasn't because I like considered myself special or different or like chosen or any of these things. It was literally purely because I was like, everyone around me is suffering. I'm suffering. None of us seem to be able to know what we're doing. And we should be able to know what we're doing. We should be able to find answers and real solutions to our problems. Like, if God exists and if there is a God, there should be like solutions. We should be able to figure things out. We should be able to get answers and wisdom and guidance from someone or something that knows better than us, or that has a higher perspective, or whatever. And of course I was filtering this through the Christian God. But even with that, I think there was a lot of me that like didn't take in what the Christian church was saying, and like you're a sinner and you're fundamentally flawed and you're disconnected from God and all this stuff. Like I was just like, nah, that doesn't really make sense. And at the same time, I was having these experiences of connecting. Okay, turns out prayer isn't enough. One would have to wait a lifetime for proof of it all. And again, I agree with that. What I learned on my path was the first kind of things that really started to give me a sense of spirituality was when I would try to connect with this being of God, okay? I was starting to have these experiences of unconditional love, right? Like the foundation of everything that I teach comes from these experiences that I've had in my spiritual life, which was the more that I sought a God outside of religion and outside of following rules and outside of any of the teachings that I was getting literally anywhere in my life, the more I just kind of kept experiencing that there was this presence that deeply loved me and that accepted me for how I was, like that knew everything about me and didn't hate me. And this was like so different from the experience that I was having in my real life, which I think is very similar to the experience that most of us are having, which is that the world around us is constantly telling us that we're not good enough, that we're not worthy, that we're not inherently worthy of love, that we're not good enough, that we're not doing enough, that we're not achieving enough. and that we're fundamentally flawed. And most religions teach this at their core, right? That we are fundamentally flawed, or that we've forgotten our true nature, and we have to get back to that. And then I was having these spiritual experiences where I was feeling the exact opposite of that from whatever it was that I was connecting with. There was just like this sense of like, yeah, you're not perfect, and yeah, you're flawed, and yeah, there's like all these problems and things that aren't going well in your life and all of this stuff. And yet there was this sense of like, but you're good enough, and I love you, and you're safe, in the sense that you are accepted just as you are. And I would deem that my first real true spiritual experience, right? This deep sense of knowing that in all of my humanness and in all of what was not perfect about me, that there was still a love out there for me that was deeply satisfying. And then within that, within connecting to that love, I was able to then start to get out of fear brain. Like, I think that that's really the easiest way that I can explain it, is getting out of this like trying to fix everything all the time and seeing everything as a problem and seeing everything as broken and seeing myself as broken and trying to fix myself all the time, into a state of true actual problem solving, right? Like starting to observe reality and no longer seeing things as being like curses or blessings, or this is happening as a test, or any of these, again, like Christian things that I had been taught, that like God just wants you to suffer, or this is the test of your faith, or blah, 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 blah. And learning to see that like, no, we're just living in a world of cause and effect. Like this is all just action and consequence. And learning to see where I had power and where I didn't, and where I could learn something. And then even, leaning on these more kind of esoteric experiences of like knowing things I couldn't have known and seeing things I couldn't have seen, and all of the kind of like magical things that people think about when they think of spirituality. That stuff all happened, but it came from this place, this foundation of connecting with a feeling of love, connecting with a feeling of I am acceptable just as I am, even within my imperfections, okay? And to me, that is what a true spiritual connection actually is. It's this being able to connect to a feeling of love and being good enough and being worthy, no matter what we are going through, no matter what we are facing, no matter how much we're struggling. And it's totally outside of the matrix that we live in, that fundamentally relies upon us feeling like shit about ourselves all the time in order to keep the economy going. Okay? So basically establishing this spiritual connection within myself, I started to live a life that a lot of people criticized me for and judged me for and really looked at me and thought that I was a total freak. Because as I was developing this connection to a love outside of myself and to this like idea that I was good enough, and as I started to realize that so much of what the world offered me as the solutions to my pain and the solutions to the things that were making me feel like shit in my life, as I was just really seeing that stuff wasn't ever going to work. It was never going to satisfy me, because it wasn't the actual thing I was looking for. It wasn't the solution. There was just so much distraction and excess and chaos. And I just started to be able to be like, I don't understand why everyone is going after all of these things, right? Like fashion and climbing the corporate ladder and living up to societal expectations of who you should be and what you should be doing and how you should be living your life and how you should look and all of this stuff. I was just like perpetually unable to make myself care about it and to pursue it because I was so busy pursuing this other thing. And that's where I feel like my path kind of diverged from where most people's paths go on their lives. And so this is when I started to like really get into yoga. Like at 14, I was like going to yoga studios and practicing yoga at like 9 a.m. all summer, like using my babysitting money to buy a yoga pass and like just being a general freak, like when you think about it in comparison to how everyone else was. Like I didn't smoke, I didn't drink, I didn't party, I didn't buy clothes, I didn't wear makeup. Like I just like, I was vegan. Like it was weird. Like I was being very weird. And it all kind of came from this obsession I had with God and this life that I was living where I was seeking something greater than what society was selling. Okay? So that is where that all came from. And then this is where the mystery school came from. This is where all of my teachings come from. This is where, like, when people are like, where did you learn all this stuff? And where do you know all this stuff? It's like, yes, like I studied Martha Beck. Yes, I've studied life coaching. Yes, I've listened to a lot of spiritual guides and teachers, and so much of it was just bullshit and stuff I didn't, not Martha Beck. Like I really highly recommend reading her books. I think her stuff is really, really great. But generally speaking, a lot of the stuff that I was taught and a lot of the stuff that I took in from other spiritual teachers and guides, I just kept being like, this isn't it. Like, this isn't it. This isn't it. Like this abundance thing, this all of these like seeking after these magical experiences, like Kundalini rising stuff and all this. I'm like, this isn't it. Like, this is not what we're actually looking for. And again, I've watched as the spiritual community has become more and more and more and more and more focused on material wealth and this promise that if you're following your spiritual path, you're gonna look and sound and end up very much like what society considers success. Right? That if you're really following your spiritual path, you're going to have some high-level job, or you're going to work your own career, like have your own business, and you're going to be wildly successful, and you're going to be like changing the world, or you're going to be having millions of clients, and you're going to be rich, and you're going to have cars, and you're going to have all this time freedom and all of this stuff. And I just keep looking at it and just being like, okay, but what does that have to do with spirituality? What does that have to do with fulfilling that thing inside of us that yearns for something greater than what we can see on this planet? Right? Like, what does materialism and physical provision have to do with connecting with something greater or higher than ourselves? Because it seems to me like there is this natural thing within all human beings, within most human beings. Like I know that there are many out there who aren't interested in spirituality and all, and that's okay. But I would even say, right, like at the end of the day, I think most of us have these existential fears and these existential dreads. We go to bed at night and we wonder what's going to happen after we die. We wonder about how to take care of our health. We wonder about things that are beyond just like, how do I live up to the expectation of society, and how do I be successful, and how do I look good, and how do I have friends, and how do I, find a partner and all that stuff. And that stuff is fine and that stuff is great. But I just feel like all of us on some level have deeper questions than that. And that we're seeking for something that's a feeling that goes beyond just what we can see and what we can feel in our senses and what we can describe to one another. And there is this part of our humanity that honestly I just don't believe can be fit into the marketplace. It doesn't fit. It just doesn't fit into our systems of consumption and production. And the more we try to satisfy this part of ourselves with consumption and production, the more we try to look to the system for if I find my right job, or if I find the right friends, or if I get enough money, or if I look the right way, that I'm going to feel satisfied, that I'm going to feel fulfilled in these areas where what we're really seeking is something totally different. The more we're going to seek after things that never satisfy us, and the more we're going to get to a place where, again, we're being convinced that we're doing it wrong or that we're just not doing it enough, right? Like we're not reaching enough success. We're not reaching enough money. We're not reaching enough abundance. We're not reaching enough purpose. We're not getting there. And that's why we don't feel how we want to feel. So agreed, we are only worried about those things because of the norms, not because we genuinely care about most of those things. That's totally true. Like a lot of the time, we are, again, trying to fit in and trying to do these things that culture tells us to do because we are hoping that when we do, that when we finally have what purpose is, when we finally have what we've been told we're supposed to have in terms of financial success, when we're finally beautiful enough or thin enough or ripped enough or big enough, when we're finally in that perfect relationship, whatever, we're gonna feel satisfied. We're gonna feel fulfilled. We're gonna feel complete. And that nagging hole inside of us is gonna be filled by the things of this world. And again, I am not here to say that things of this world cannot be satisfying. Okay? No one is saying that finding a deeply connected relationship isn't beautiful and wonderful and satisfying. I am not saying that feeling a sense of purpose in your career is not a lovely thing and something that we might want to look for. I'm not saying that, taking care of your body and feeling healthy to the degree that you can and all that stuff isn't positive and beneficial. These things are. And I do those things in life. I'm not saying that I'm some sort of renunciate who just sits in my room all day and meditates and is happy communing with God 24/7. Obviously this is not true. I run a company. I am chronically ill, so I have a lot of things I have to do in a day to just keep my body going. I am married. I have friends. I live a life too. But at the same time, what I am saying is none of these things fill me. None of these things are what satisfy me. None of these things are what I turn to when I need answers. None of these things are the solution to what was causing me to feel like life wasn't worth living when I was a child. Okay? These things of the world don't give me what I'm looking for. And I learned that really early on in my childhood. And I feel very grateful and lucky that for some reason that was a revelation I had really early. And at the same time, I really learned that, for me anyways, religion wasn't the way. That spirituality through the Christian lens or through a pastor or through a teacher or through a guide. I spent a lot of time, like I say, being Christian for a really long time and then deconstructing from Christianity and looking for spiritual guides in other modalities, in yoga, in Eastern philosophy, in Buddhism, in Hinduism, looking into all of these things. And while I could find seeds of truth in all of it, and while I believe that there are beautiful things in all different types and forms of spirituality, I've never landed on something that I can be like, I am a... Because for me, spirituality is such a deeply personal thing. And I believe, because of my experience, that it is something that is between us, like our inner world, and this connection to a feeling of unconditional love and unconditional acceptance for who and what we are. And of course, I also believe, right, like we're all going to filter it through our own experience and our own lens and our own what we have been through and what kind of makes sense to us and what we've been taught and what is familiar to us. And I think that there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, so I'm not here to say that if Christianity or if Buddhism or if some ism really resonates for you and helps you connect to this feeling, that that's wrong. Of course not. I am not here to say that there's any one right way to have spirituality. There just isn't. It's what helps you connect to something beyond the idea that there's something wrong with you that needs to be fixed before you can feel good. That is what I believe true spirituality to be. That when we can connect to a feeling, however we get there, that we are not fundamentally fallen, flawed, broken, needing to make up for our humanity. But rather it is in our humanity that we find our connection. If you're finding that, to me, you are finding true spirituality. And however you get there, whatever helps you feel that way, whatever helps you establish that connection, is A-okay with me. Because, again, it's not about what I think you should be having. It's not about my opinion of you. It's not about, do I think it's right or wrong? It's about you and your experience. So, again, I understand that we live in a world where, to a degree, right, we need money. And to a degree, we need connection. And we need food. And we need health in order to feel good. Okay? These things inherently make us feel good. They make us feel safe. They make us feel okay. Because we are biological organisms that, just like every other biological organism, wants to live, wants to keep being alive, and wants to feel the pleasure of being alive. So again, I'm not saying renounce everything. None of it is real. All of it is an illusion, because it isn't. It's not. It is a part of this experience. It can be a part of our spirituality, right? Like when we incorporate how we make money and how we interact with the people around us and how we feed our bodies with this higher awareness of unconditional love and being good enough and not having to live up to the expectation of everyone around us, but what is actually beneficial. Okay, so this to me, again, is the real shift that happens when we start to live a truly spiritual life. We stop looking for the right answer. We stop looking for what's good. We stop looking for what we should do. We stop looking for the people who have the answers. And we start to be able to say, no, What are the actual causes and effects in my life? We start to live for how things feel and how they are versus how they look. Okay, so this is the first step away from spiritual capitalism into true spirituality. In spiritual capitalism, we're told these are the right things to do. These are the trends. And usually you can identify them, right? Because they are being sold to you. It's a thing you have to buy. It's a thing you have to participate in, right? You have to dress the right way. You have to speak the right way. You have to have the right lingo. You have to have the right aesthetic. When we start to get into this kind of thing, like we're role playing, that's not it. That is not what spirituality is. If that's real to you, and that's how you naturally want to carry yourself, and that's how you naturally want to speak, and that's what feels genuine for you as you tap into this feeling of unconditional love, and you tap into observing cause and effect and what seems to be beneficial in your life, go for it. But if you're following some path because someone is telling you this is what it looks like, this is what it sounds like, this is what it is to be spiritual, we're going down the road of capitalism. We're being separated from how it actually feels and from actual outcome, and we're putting the cart before the horse. Okay, so it may end up that as you follow your path and you follow what feels good and you follow what is actually beneficial, that you end up speaking in a different way or carrying yourself in a different way. You might end up looking kind of caricature-y. But if it's coming from a place of like, yeah, but this is like genuinely how I want to speak, this makes sense to me, this feels good for me, I'm doing this because there's positive outcome, that's when we know we're on the real path, because it feels right, not because it looks right. Okay, so what do you do for feeling guilty for being more spiritual than religious because most religions want us to obey and scare us about sinning, that we will face problems or hell because we did not obey? Right? That's capitalism. We have to look at this, right? If there's a power play and a power structure and humans are at the helm, that's capitalism. That's people trying to control people so that they can have more power and more access to resource. And that's all that is at the end of the day. This is part of why I am not a part of any religion or any group or any organization, because I'm simply not interested in any hierarchy. I don't believe that there's anyone between me and God. I don't believe that there's anyone between anyone and God. And so long as I look at the structures of a spiritual community and I ask myself, who's benefiting from the rules? Who's benefiting from what I'm supposed to be obeying and what I'm supposed to be thinking about myself and what I'm supposed to be doing? And if it's a human, that's my red flag. Right? If at the end of the day, it means someone is getting more power over other people, that's not spirituality. Because to me, in my real experience, spirituality is the great leveler. The more I deepen my spirituality, the more I come to truly believe and see that all humans are equally valuable, lovable, acceptable, worthy, just as they are. that there are no higher or lower human beings. We are all truly, fundamentally worthy of love just as we are. And we're all deeply unique, but none of us deserve to have our humanity elevated above anyone else's humanity. So this is why I personally don't participate in stuff like that. I personally don't believe in stuff like that. So long as someone wants me to feel guilty about anything about who I am or what I am, I believe that that is a human institution and that is not spirituality. Because again, I have enough spiritual maturity to understand that I can cause harm and I can do things that are not good in real reality. I can hurt people, I can misunderstand, I can be all kinds of harmful. And I don't need shame, blame, or guilt to understand that. If I'm observing reality and if I'm in my feelings, I'm going to feel how terrible that feels. I'm going to observe negative outcomes from my ways of being. And I don't need anyone to tell me that I'm sinning or that I'm doing something wrong, because reality will tell me that. Outcome will tell me that. Right? I've learned to trust that being a good person does not require that I have some sort of structure outside of myself telling me what the rules are, because it's very blatantly obvious in reality when I'm causing destruction and when I am not. So what is the point of this? What is the point of this? You're sinning, you're doing it wrong. And again, like questioning these rules. That was a big part of why I never fit into the Christian church. Because it was always like, well, why? Why do we have to do that? Why does that make us good or bad? And do these rules that we're following actually benefit others? Do they make the world a safer place for other people to be? Do they make the world a more gentle place? Do they make the world a more equitable place? Or is it just about me constantly monitoring myself and trying to deny and reject and suppress my natural humanity so that I'm constantly distracted and then feeding into our system? Because this is the next thing, right? So much of our system is about keeping us distracted so that we don't recognize the harm the system is causing and the ways in which we are participating in that harm without seeing it. Okay, so good terminology differentiation. Spiritual capitalism versus true spirituality. Love it. I must plagiarize that phrasing, lol. Yeah, totally. Right? Spiritual capitalism says, just keep focusing on yourself. Navel gaze. Perfect yourself. And here are all the ways in which you need to change and you need to improve and you need to become better in order to become perfect. And so much of religion says this to us over and over and over again. You are inherently a sinner, you are inherently flawed, and you are never going to reach perfection. You are never going to get there, but you need to strive for it for the rest of your life. All that does is force us to be in a state where we are constantly obsessing about ourselves. Where we are constantly worrying about policing and monitoring and perfecting our own behavior. We're looking for the right thing, we're looking for the right answers, we're looking for the solutions. We're looking at ourselves, looking at ourselves, looking at ourselves, looking at ourselves. And then we wonder why we live in this world where atrocities can be being committed on a daily basis and people don't give a shit. It's not because people really don't give a shit. It's because they're so wrapped up in being afraid for themselves, in being afraid of themselves, that they have no bandwidth left over to participate in any kind of change or to realize how we're all being manipulated in a way that is not beneficial to the people, but is beneficial to our power structures. This is why this excessive consumerism spirituality is so dangerous, in my opinion. Again, we all deserve enough. I'm not saying that everyone needs to be the most minimal, you have nothing, you live on the street, and you just, beg for food and have no possessions and live out of a backpack. No one is saying that. What I am saying is, beyond what we need to be comfortable, when we get into excess wealth, we really need to question if that's actually serving any kind of spiritual purpose. Right? Like, even the idea that, like, when you're rich, you can donate your money. You have more power and more say in the economy. Okay, this still comes from this idea of people hoarding huge amounts of wealth via exploiting their workers, not paying living wages, not giving benefits, not giving people actual freedom of choice in their life, but hoarding all that wealth so they can then kind of give it back in charity. That is not helping people. Taking people's autonomy away from themselves, taking people's freedom of choice of how they want to live their life away from them, and then half-handing it back by saying, these are the things that I'm saying I'm going to give you access to. That is not empowering people. That's not helping people. That's keeping people completely disempowered. And so when we participate in a system of making ourselves wealthier than we need to be, we need to understand we are participating in a system that necessitates people not having enough and not having then autonomy and choice in their life. That is not a spiritual thing. Right? So again, we need to look at the systems. We need to look at where are these things coming from? Where are these teachings coming from? It's spiritual to be rich. Okay, so then what? Jeff Bezos is like the most spiritual person on the planet? The monarchs that have been hoarding gabillions of dollars for generations, those are our spiritual leaders? I think most of us would take a step back and say, no, I wouldn't follow those people as spiritual. But the abundant spirituality people are telling us that if you're aligned with your purpose and you're doing what you're supposed to be doing with your life, you'll be abundant and you won't have to work and you can just do whatever the fuck you want. That's what these people have. So then are they the most spiritual people? Should we be following them? Should we all go to the church of Jeff Bezos? Right? Like, when we put it that way, I think most of us are like, that's ridiculous. But that's what we're believing when we buy into spiritual capitalism. Do you see what I'm saying here? It's not it. And number one, it is not satisfying. It will not make you feel fulfilled. Like, I think, again, most of us can look at these incredibly rich people and we can see that they are not fulfilled. We can see that they are not mentally, emotionally, and physically healthy. That it's not working out for them. Yeah, they have a lot of power. And yeah, they are causing a lot of destruction and a lot of chaos, and they can set the rules. But to what end? What are they getting? They're like, what is this? It's just destruction. It's just chaos and destruction over and over and over and over and over again. Like, I think if we really take a step back and we look at it, the people that go deepest into our system, that go deepest into capitalism and domination and hierarchy and what our current culture calls success, are the most empty people we have on the planet. Why are we wanting to emulate them? Why are we wanting to emulate that system and then just call it spirituality? Because it isn't. It most certainly is not. I believe, in my opinion, in order to be that wealthy, you have to be so disconnected from your humanity. You have to be so disconnected from love. You have to be so disconnected from reality itself that I can't even imagine what it must be like to be inside that person's head and body. It must be a living hell. That's all I can imagine. Because when I see it on a lower level, these people who are constantly chasing purpose and navel gazing and trying to improve and trying to keep up in the system so that they can be abundant and wealthy and over the top, they lie about their lives. Their lives are all just like a show on social media. They are deeply disconnected. There's this perpetual, I found the answer, and here's the answer, and here's, I'll sell it to you, and come to my retreat, and da-da-da-da-da. And then 6 months later, there's a new thing, and then 6 months later, there's a new thing, and there's no consistency to it, and it's just jumping from one thing to the next, and then all of a sudden they're Christian, then all of a sudden they're New Age, and then all of a sudden they're this and that. And it's like, clearly, people aren't finding it. Clearly, people are not satisfied. Yeah, they can get really rich. They can sell a lot of courses. They can make it look like they're having a great life on social media. But they aren't. And they don't feel it, and they don't feel good. Yeah, no one can reach that level of money with morals and doing right by people. And so this is what I'm saying. It's like when we start to connect with real, true spirituality, we don't need an institution to tell us what is right and wrong. Right? Like if you join the mystery school, I am not going to tell you how to live your life. It's the opposite of a cult in the sense that like I am not there to tell you this is what you need to do and this is how you need to be and this is what spirituality is or this is what being in alignment with reality is. Because I do believe that to a degree, it's different for all of us. Every single one of us is going to have a different way that we live that makes sense for where we are and the situations we're in and what we need to deal with on a regular, like on a real level. Because like again, for me, we have to understand, am I living 100% in alignment with my values? Of course not. Am I hypocritical? Yes. Because the system is not set up for me to live 100% in alignment with my humanity. I participate in things every single day that are harmful to others. And I'm aware of that. Every single time I buy something with plastic wrapped around it, I am causing harm to the planet. And there are some times and places where I have no choice. Where I could choose to not eat. Or I could choose to, do you see what I'm saying? We live in a world that is so inherently set up against our humanity and against our survival that we're all going to make choices every single day that aren't in alignment with the highest good. And we need to be humble about that. And we also need to realize that a lot of the time, right, like, we didn't create the system that we're living in. And so where is our power to affect change? Where is our power to make it better? Where is our power to be more in alignment with the integrity that we can like see and feel and know? And where can we understand that like we don't have control and we can't do it perfectly? So why do you think there is a war between humanity and evil? Is it all greed and power? I don't believe that there's evil. I believe there's misunderstanding. This is what I'm trying to say. This capitalism, power and wealth and money and things of the world are going to satisfy you. That's the lie. And so when we follow that, this is what it looks like. When we don't have a true connection to our humanity, when we don't have a true connection to spirituality, which helps us to understand that we are inherently connected to everything else, which helps us understand cause and effect, which helps us to say, yeah, okay, I might be able to dominate, but what is the actual benefit of that? What is the actual outcome of that? And to see things long term, that's what true spirituality is. And so when we don't have that, this is what we have. Humans are not evil. They're flawed in their perspective and perception. We've been sold a lie for so long that we cannot recognize it because it is the water we are swimming in. That wealth, abundance, and power is what satisfies us. That fighting against our humanity and fighting against the humanity of others and fighting against the planet is the way to feel safe and good and to calm that voice at night that is afraid of our mortality, is the way to get rid of that existential dread that we are all feeling. That's what I think it boils down to. People are running from their existential nature. This fact that we live in a body where we have this awareness of that we're going to be born and that we're going to die, but we don't have an awareness of what happens after death. We have an awareness that we can suffer, and we don't know that we can protect ourselves from it all the time. It's super existential to be self-aware, but not completely self-aware. And we're trying to fill that void. We're trying to shore up that fear with stuff, with the stuff of the world. And it doesn't work. It doesn't satisfy us. And the more we try, the worse it gets. The more destructive we get, the more navel-gazing we get, and we will either become destructive outwardly or destructive inwardly, right? Like so many people who come to my work are destructive inwardly. They're just constantly beating up on themselves, hating themselves, doubting themselves. They have no connection to an inner resource or an inner sense of trust or an inner sense that they can figure things out because they've been so deeply trained to reject every part of themselves that they're just pawns in the game. They have nothing other than just following what everyone else is doing and trying to get approval. Because they've been so systematically separated from their ability to feel what feels good, to observe outcome, to problem solve. And that's what I try to teach in the mystery school, and that's what I try to teach in coaching. It's like when you come back to yourself, you start to be able to get this power that you've been looking for in trying to be what everyone wanted you to be and trying to be what everyone approved of from within. And then you start to live a life where you are so much less self-focused, where you are able to be like, okay, how are my actions affecting others? How can I actually empower others? How can I be a part of making this world a safer place for everyone else? How can I change my choices and stop shoring up more and more and more for myself? Because I have enough, or I am okay, or this is good enough, or I have something to offer here. True spirituality should make us less navel-gazing, less constantly trying to control our behavior. Because we trust, if I do something shitty, I'll know about it. Because it'll feel shitty. There'll be shitty outcome. And then I can change. I can learn from that. I can do different. I'm not now fundamentally fucked. That's true spirituality. So this is what I'm trying to say. It's like we need to separate ourselves from everything being a part of the economy. And if it comes down to someone else is being empowered through your disempowerment, or you are needing to abdicate your feelings to go in alignment with other people say you should or shouldn't be doing, and it's not helping you to look at outcome, it's not helping you to look at how it feels and what it actually is versus how it looks, it's not real spirituality. It's just capitalism. You are inherently worthy of love, and you will always have room for improvement. These two things exist simultaneously. And the more you can accept that love for who and what you are right here, right now, the more you will be capable of that growth and that change. And the less you will feel like you need to be so hyper fixated on yourself. And you can start to take a wider view of the world and where you can participate in making it better for all of us. True spirituality is not about following rules. It's about learning about real reality and how real reality functions and actual cause and effect and outcome, right? It's harder. There isn't a rule book for it. You can't just go to the book and look for the rule. And that's what a lot of people really want, because they think they need that, because they've never been taught that they can figure it out for themselves, that it's obvious in reality when you're really looking. Okay? So what if spirituality isn't going to be found in something you can buy or something you can produce or something you can pretend to be? What if there's something much deeper and it's something that we have to feel and that does come from the inside and then it shows itself on the outside? It's not all internal, it's not all external, it's both. What if it's not about leaning into a power structure, but it's about leaning away from these power structures, because we're all equal? So how do we live that life? Right? And how do we face the existential stuff of life and not run away from it and not try to fill it with stuff and approval and the external world telling us that we're good enough? Can we lean into that stuff and learn to process it on a real level? To face it as a part of our reality. Okay? So that's what I wanted to offer today. Hopefully it resonates with you. If it doesn't, I totally understand. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. I hope that this opens some doors for you, that spirituality is not about living up to the expectation of culture. That's not what this is, and it's not going to satisfy. There's something bigger and deeper and more satisfying, and also much less complicated. And that's just real reality, cause and effect. and unconditional love for who and what you are right now so that you can continue to grow for the rest of your life. Okay? Okay. So thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next week.